In 1989, a man called Bob Lazar walked into a Las Vegas TV station and gave a remarkable interview. He said that he'd worked out in the Nevada desert at a top-secret facility known as Area 51. He said he worked on a highly classified project, reverse engineering recovered alien spacecraft. His story was a worldwide sensation, and Area 51 became a household name, synonymous with UFOs, secret projects, and little green men. And yet, neither the US government nor its military have ever denied his claims, and they still don't officially confirm that Area 51 exists, despite satellite photos proving it does. Many dismiss Bob Lazar as a fantasist, and yet others see him as a whistleblower, exposing a government cover-up of UFOs and alien contact.
I am convinced, based on my research and the individuals whom I've had contact in the U.S. intelligence community, that the U.S. government does indeed have craft that meet the description of many of the UFO reports. My personal opinion, based on comments I've gotten from the Deputy Director for Science and Technology at CIA, would seem to indicate that Bob was perhaps an unwitting participant in a program designed to introduce someone with a technical background to some elements of the UFO research projects going on out at the test site.
I have no doubts that Lazar actually was in a place where top secret investigations were going on. I'm not sure about all the details that have emerged from his account, but he certainly gives me the impression that he was actually there.
Do I believe Bob Lazar? My answer to that is yes. And heck, it's going on 8 years that I've known him. His story has never changed. He wasn't in it for the publicity. He surely wasn't in it for the money. He lost everything he had. I believe he's totally sincere.
As far as I can tell, he's a bright guy who tells a great tale and who's told it often to people who have not checked on him, who accept the notion that, well, the government wiped his slate clean.
Basically, I think he had an experience. I think he saw some things that shocked him, was subject to some conditions and experiences that were very unnerving to him and very profound.
He said, "You would love to see what's out there because it's like beyond science fiction." He said, and I wish I could talk to you about it, but I can't. And that's as close as he ever got to telling me anything that happened out there.
You'll find many people who have seen these discs. Question is, where do they come from? Bob Lazar may be one of the few people who can tell us that they're from somewhere else.
I've no doubt that there's a relatively small number of people within the intelligence, military intelligence and scientific and technical intelligence community who are aware of what's going on, and an even smaller group who are actually organizing top secret research into this phenomenon.
There's been an operating airbase out at the location known as Area 51 since the 1950s, when it was home to the CIA's top secret SR-71 Blackbird spy plane. Then in the 1970s, it became the test flight center for the F-117 stealth fighter and the B-2 stealth bomber.
It's fairly public knowledge that we have a super secret facility in the mountains in northern Nevada, referred to as Groom Lake, Area 51 of the Nellis Air Force Base Test Range. It's also been referred to as Dreamland. This is an area that has been known but officially denied for many decades. All of our super secret aircraft have been developed and test flown out in this particular area. So it only makes sense that if you have something as sophisticated as a flying saucer and the related technology to that, that would certainly be one of the prime locations you'd want to go.
What you see is an ordinary looking Air Force base. It's nothing to write home about, but because the government won't talk about it, everyone wants to see it. The military has never said there are no UFOs. It's never directly denied any of the Area 51 stories. It would have been so simple when these claims came out, these Papoose Lake claims, for the military to simply say, look, we have nothing there. They could take a few reporters to this area and show them, nothing there. The military hasn't done it. The military has stonewalled it, has remained silent. And that's the most damning thing that they can do.
Area 51 to this day is not acknowledged. That is to say, the Air Force does not admit that it exists. This status has been maintained very carefully, particularly in the last few years. The puzzle is that the base has clearly been very active for quite a while, and you can see that there are about 700 to 1,000 people traveling from Las Vegas every day. So essentially the bulk of what has gone on there in the last 10 years has not emerged from the black.
This airplane the program was terminated. The airplanes were put in mothballs for 20 years before they admitted the existence of the aircraft. There's programs that they're working on today that are 50 years ahead of anything that you and I could even conceive of, and that we may never see the light of day.
Would you say it's America's most top secret military base?
As far as an operational test facility, it's probably the most secret test facility in the free world, yes.
So there is no question that the facility is there, and the government has said very little in the past about it. Now, the real question, I suppose, is, are there any flying saucers out there?
No one had associated flying saucers with Area 51 until Bob Lazar's interview hit television screens around the world. He said that he worked at an underground facility called S4. The top secret project was codenamed Galileo.
They would call it a specific time. For instance, the operator would say, Mr. Lazar, it's now 4:15 a.m. We expect you to be at McCarran Airport at 4:45. Your plane will be leaving at such and such time. I'd drive there, check in, board the plane, and the plane would fly out to Groom Lake. It would land there. I'd get off the plane and wait, and there would be a bus to take me and whoever else is going to S4, Papoose Lake, which is about 15 miles south of there, and then I would check in at S4.
Tell me about how you felt on your very first trip out.
The first trip out there, it was actually very exciting because it seemed so cloak and dagger to me, especially after I got in the bus with the blacked out windows. I kind of thought that was neat. Drove out to the site, and then it was checked in, guards walking around with guns, and I was sure what I was working on was going to be pretty fascinating.
He says that within a few days of working out at S4, he was shown an actual flying disc in one of the hangars.
When I was brought in by bus, and for the first time, one of the hangar doors, the one on the end, was open. the bus drove up and we stopped there, and clear as day in the hangar, taking up almost all the hangar, was the disc. Looked like something right out of a science fiction movie. And as I walked in there, I thought, well, this is the new advanced aircraft we've been working on, and this is why people keep seeing flying saucers, because it's ours, and we've just been testing it, probably for all these years.
And what color and size was it?
It was a dull stainless steel, pewter gray, very unimpressive color-wise. About 52.8 feet in diameter and about 16 feet high.
So was it actually a recovered craft that you were working on, or was it one that scientists had built as a mock-up of a recovered craft?
Well, whether it was recovered, given, or what, it was not built as a mock-up. It was an alien craft built on another world. There was absolutely no doubt about that.
Lazar claims that he was one of only 22 people who had something called majestic clearance to work on the craft itself.
The whole aim of the project was to take these craft, or the one in particular that I was working on, and try and duplicate its systems and subsystems with earthly materials. The work that I did basically entailed back engineering the power and propulsion system, and I opted to start with the power, the reactor that ran the craft.
I knew immediately if his credentials could be verified, if even part of his story could be verified, it'd be one tremendous expose.
George Knapp was a long-standing TV reporter. He'd heard enough of the UFO rumors over the years to appreciate how big a scoop this could be if Lazar was telling the truth.
He gave me information about his background, educational background and employment background. I started with his claim to have worked at Los Alamos Lab. We went to Los Alamos and got nothing even close to cooperation. They wouldn't respond to our phone calls. They say, we have no information on Bob Lazar. There's nothing in the files. I said, are you sure now? No, nothing in the files. I showed them the phone book entry that Bob had kept that said he was there. I showed him the newspaper article that showed that he was there. Basically, Los Alamos Lab tried to thwart me at every step. Were completely uncooperative in trying to get information about Bob, and I found that to be the case at every step of the way in trying to verify his background.
Thursday, 12:37 p.m.
Former NASA mission specialist Bob Exler had heard about Area 51 and Groom Lake when he worked on the Apollo and Space Shuttle projects. He was intrigued by Lazar's claims and started to investigate.
I did a variety of research relative to Bob Lazar. I actually met him. I obtained a copy of his what they call a W-2 form, which is one of the IRS documents associated with pay. His particular form indicated that he worked for the U.S. Department of Naval Intelligence. They informed me that it was a genuine document. It was not something that had been fabricated. There were a variety of numbers, contract numbers and so forth issued on the document, which I was able to research, again finding that these were highly classified numbers. In fact, Internal Revenue Service ran into a brick wall when it came to trying to track down the actual employer associated with the document. And then again, with the Social Security Administration, we found that Bob Lazar's records had in fact been bleached clean. There was nothing there, in spite of the fact that the document clearly indicated that Social Security taxes had been taken out of his pay.
not everyone who's researched Bob Lazar believes his claims. Stanton Friedman is one of the most respected authors in the UFO field today. He's a former nuclear physicist with top secret clearance and has many friends and contacts in the Black Project world.
I've looked at considerable depth into Bob Lazar's claims, both about himself and about propulsion system, because they're fairly elaborate claims. I've talked to the schools that he claims to have received degrees from. I've checked on his high school record. I talked to Los Alamos Lab where he was supposedly a scientist and so forth. I have come up totally empty. Now, when a guy lies like that, you get very wary. And, you know, it has all the trimmings, his story, of a Walter Mitty story. Somebody in his imagination was, you know, stronger, brighter, faster than anybody else. I don't doubt that he did some work at Los Alamos and other places. He's clever. He drives a jet-powered car, fixes radiation detectors. So he may have performed some service, but I can find no reason to think that he worked out there on a flying saucer.
I mean, I had to wonder whether this guy was making this stuff up, but then I see the phone book and I see the newspaper article, and I talked to people who worked with Bob at the lab and who said, in fact, that he did work on classified projects, yet no one can find any records of his background.
The people that I worked with, colleagues, the people I went to school with, obviously knew I was there, and people at Los Alamos, I was friends with, and people that worked under me and alongside of me knew I was there and, you know, cooperate what was going on, but, you know, officially, it's very difficult to get information for the people in charge.
To further prove his claims, Lazar agreed to take a polygraph test, which he passed.
The thing that is interesting about polygraph is that if you're embellishing or if you don't completely believe what you're saying, it is very, very easy to detect. All it really will tell you is that the individual believes with 100% conviction that what he's reporting is exactly as he recalls and as he believes it to be. And that clearly was the case with Bob Lazar. Now, could his perception have been a bit askew? Yes, that's possible, but he clearly wasn't lying.
I think Bob is even open to the possibility that perhaps he had been used in some sort of misinformation or disinformation campaign. I mean, look at him. He has a pirate flag floating on his house. He races jet cars. He likes fast women. He likes guns. He's technically capable, so in that sense, he may be perfect for this kind of a program. Technically capable, scientifically knowledgeable, and yet completely discreditable at a moment's notice. If you wanted to test public reaction to a story about Area 51 and then suddenly discredit it afterwards, Bob may have been the most qualified person in the country.
Lazar says that on one occasion he was escorted into the flying disc that he saw in the hangar to analyze its propulsion system.
It was obviously made to be piloted by something smaller than the average human being, very cramped in there.
What were the size of these seats that were in there?
The seats were very small. I'd say about 1/3 to 1/4 the size of a normal human seat. A lot of people say, boy, it must have been exciting to go in there, and I always say it wasn't. It was a very ominous feeling. I know it sounds silly, but it's so unearthly in there.
You have spoken to someone who's actually seen a UFO under a tarpaulin at Area 51?
I have. I've spoken to several people who've seen UFOs or disc-shaped craft out there. There was a woman who was a secretary for a major defense contractor at the Nevada test site who'd worked on nuclear programs, who told me that she had sat in on conversations between military and civilian contractors at which the Roswell case had been discussed, at which it had been discussed taking some Roswell material to Area 51. The level of secrecy during those meetings was great. Afterward, they'd take the ribbons out of the typewriter she was typing on. She was ready to tell me about this, and I had this conversation with her on the phone. The next day after this conversation takes place, she's visited by two men who say that they work for the company she used to work for, reminding her that she is still under a security oath, told her, "We know that you do a lot of traveling back and forth, a lot of long drives between Las Vegas and LA. We'd hate for something to happen to you or your family." No interview. I mean, it happened again and again and again. Same scenario.
Lazar says that in addition to being shown inside the disc, he actually saw it take off from the lake bed.
I was brought into the hangar for one of the short duration tests, and the craft was already outside on the lake bed, and that was pretty much of a marvelous sight. It's a huge thing. It's like seeing a house lift off the ground. You can't imagine the energy involved to do that. Because of the extremely high energy output and the fact that the outside of the craft is used as a conductor, that does ionize the air. And the crafts do, as a byproduct of this, glow at night, much like a fluorescent tube will light up. So, you know, bright, strange, jumping lights in the sky, that does explain that.
Would you categorically say there is no way that humans could have built the craft that you saw?
Absolutely. I will categorically deny that. Well, I don't know. How exactly should I put that? I guess I can just say it straight out. There is no way that any government on this earth could produce that craft, period. And I defy anyone to argue that point.
One of the big questions that's hung over this whole story is whether Lazar saw a man-made flying disc and not an alien spacecraft.
A lot of these craft which are being developed in secrecy in the United States are tested at night, and one can imagine that seen through kind of half-closed eyes, something like an F-117 stealth fighter or a B-2 bomber, side-on or front-on, would look remarkably like, say, a flying saucer or a UFO.
You see an F-117, or you see tacit blue, or you see a B-2. Particularly if you see it from some fairly unusual angle, you're going to have a very hard time relating that to conventional aircraft. Some of these things can look very strange indeed. So, you know, an unusual but decidedly terrestrial aircraft can certainly present the appearance of a disc from many angles.
I think for anyone who's been out into the western United States and seen the kind of place it is and let their imaginations run riot a bit, it is possible to imagine in these vast test areas technologies which are highly exotic, highly revolutionary, and would change the way we feel about science today. However, to say that that is alien science derived from beyond this world, I think is something which is just, it is unbelievable. It's too much to absorb.
Do you think that some of the truth certainly lies out there in the middle of the Nevada desert at Groom Lake?
I would expect that some of the truth may very well lie out in the desert near Groom Lake. It's the right place for some of it to be. It's isolated, it's under control, it's high security. I don't think we've yet scratched the surface on what's happening out there with regard to flying saucers.
According to Lazar, the craft that they were secretly testing out in the desert at night used an exotic anti-gravity propulsion system.
The reactor itself was an incredibly advanced system. This was an antimatter reactor. This is something we could only dream of having, something that could put out huge amounts of power that rivals several nuclear power plants running at capacity. What happens is a great gravity distortion is created, and you're essentially bending space toward the craft. The craft becomes part of that space, and then when the reactors, or when the gravity amplifiers are shut down, the craft is essentially where it was focused. It's a very difficult thing to grasp. It happens virtually instantaneously because of the fact that gravity distorts time. And if you're bending space and time along with it, when you wind back up in that place, you're there between the ticks of a clock.
Looking at nighttime video films out in the test site area, we've seen video of craft that were luminous, that would move across the sky as if it was skipping a stone across water, or sort of a sewing machine effect. What we see across the screen are a series of lights, of dashes of light, as the object moves from point A to point B. Therefore, we are seeing what you might call a shadow effect of the propulsion mechanism at work.
Bob Lazar is not the only person who's come forward and claimed to have worked out at the base on flying discs. Former US Marines test pilot Bill Uhouse worked out at Groom Lake and other top-secret locations for more than 40 years, working for the Pentagon and civilian contractors on a variety of highly classified projects, including, he says, a flying disc recovered from a crash in Kingman, Arizona in May 1953. He said that he'd been cleared to do this interview and to discuss certain information, but asked us not to show his face.
What were you actually working on out there?
One of the things I worked on was a flying disc simulator. It was designed in New Mexico by a separate staff that built it in parallel with the actual craft that they had intended to fly. The purpose of the simulator was to train pilots to fly this strange-looking craft. The simulator was a 10-meter round disc. The skin was made of boron composite material, not unlike that you see on the F-117.
How did you know how to build the simulator?
Essentially, there weren't any plans. The plans were generated as we constructed it. And there was a process there that took quite a while for us to even understand the concept way back in the 50s.
Uhouse says that Lazar did work at Area 51.
I think Bob is saying exactly what he knows, and I know a little bit about Bob from a different standpoint than a lot of the people know and what's been written about him, but Bob Lazar is not lying as far as his place and position and the activity he was involved with at the time, although some of it, you know, he couldn't recall, but there's a lot of reasons why Bob was hired, number one. You know, here's the thing. Take a guy like Bob, send him out there, you know, somebody said, you know, aliens, blah, 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 blah. You know, all of a sudden you're thinking about 9 alien crafts. You know, they may have not been 9 alien crafts.
Southwest 1714, contact departure, good day.
Do you believe that the government has recovered alien spacecraft?
I have no doubts whatsoever that the United States has actually recovered a number of extraterrestrial vehicles.
And what do they do with them?
I think that since 1947, there have been efforts to try and duplicate the technology, what is referred to as reverse engineering. And I don't know how far they've got, but some reports indicate that we've actually been test flying within a limited area actual alien vehicles or terrestrial vehicles, United States vehicles which have been made using alien technology.
Could these not just be military aircraft?
Well, I think it's quite possible some of them are military aircraft. I've heard from very reliable sources, including a leading specialist on unmanned aerial vehicles, that we have developed some disc-shaped platforms for aerial reconnaissance, some quite small, maybe some larger, which are being utilized by the Americans and have been built by the Americans.
That's 638-9er Delta, Las Vegas Tower, runway 19 left, taxi into position and hold traffic crossing downfield. Thank you, sir. 89er Delta.
Was it a hard secret to keep?
It was a virtually impossible secret to keep, but I did play by the rules, and it caused a lot of problems. It caused problems in my family life. I mean, imagine being married at the time, and you know, you get a call, you know, perhaps at night, and a strange voice on the phone. Okay, you disappear, you can't tell your wife who it was on the phone, where you're going, and you come back, you know, sometime early in the morning. I mean, what is she going to think?
Unaware of where he was going every day and being absent from home for long periods, Bob's relationship with his wife had deteriorated badly. This was seen as a potential security risk out at the base.
My wife was having an affair with someone else, so they viewed that as a potential emotional instability, and they no longer wanted me coming out until things were cleared up, either for it, you know, it to break up or heal or whatever. But they, that's what put the brakes on everything there.
And did they then stop calling you? Did you get very frustrated about that?
Yeah, then I began to wonder, boy, now they've given me all this information and everything's come to a dead stop. What's going on? And that's when I began to be concerned, and then that's when I said, you know, now it's becoming important that some other people know what was going on.
As the silence turned from days to weeks, he finally decided to tell his wife and closest friends just what he'd been doing.
Were you aware of the security implications?
I was quite aware of what could happen, but I was also aware that these guys would go to any extent to keep their secret, and certainly not have someone that was on the inside running around. And I didn't think it was beyond them at all to make me disappear. Whether I mean, who knows? I know it sounds more like a movie, but I didn't think it was beyond their capability to kill me, just to stop the word from getting out.
Bob knew the test flight schedule for the discs and took his wife, his best friend Jean Huff, and another friend John Lear out to the desert near the base on a Wednesday night in March 1989.
Huh, it started coming in too.
UFO are making, that thing pick up stuff. If it's like overhead, like up in the air.
Overhead, 300 miles.
Jeez. So it could be any one of these guys.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that sounds military to me. Yeah, I bet you that's what this is. We got. Oh.
You see that?
Whoa. Yeah, what was that? Did you see that light just come on over there?
That just
I was looking right at it.
Yeah.
Here, let me check it out.
Well, that was a shooting star.
Right above it was a meteor, too. No, there's a steady light.
No, it's a steady light that just came
without
on.
Any kind of.
No, this one right over the range here. It wasn't there, and then I was looking right there, and it blinked on.
Very bright. That's brighter than a star.
Yeah. Huh, doesn't look like landing lights.
We got the light clear now, sir. We figured out what the problem is, and whatever that heading is, we're ready for it.
Huh, interesting.
Okay, just change course.
Oh. White light?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's coming at us.
What did you see when you were out there?
Shortly after the flight time that I had recorded, white light came up. Well, not a white light, it was actually more of an amber light. Came up off the ground and hovered, and then began doing radical step maneuvers and darting from one side of the sky to the other, doing some impossible flight characteristics.
Do you think what you saw over the desert that night was an alien spacecraft?
Could I identify it as an ET craft without Bob's help? No, it would have been like I said, an elliptically shaped saucer doing, just doing moves that we're not capable of, but I could not say that, no, this wasn't some advanced Earth technology.
We got the light clear now, sir. We figured out what the problem is, and whatever that heading is, we're ready for it.
That would be a UFO. It's not blinking, it's not conforming to any sort of FAA lighting regulations, and there you're looking at it. That's like a typical UFO. If it was red, it would be real typical, because that's what most people report, is red lights like that are solid colored. I don't think that's landing lights, because it's curved already and we're still looking at it. Looks like he's curving back. Here he comes. That is a typical military UFO. There you go.
Head out there, sir. I heard you say our call sign and nothing after that. Miles will be ahead of you, but you never know.
This small group went back to see 2 more Wednesday night flight tests, but on the 3rd trip, they were spotted, caught, and arrested. Bob was taken to Indian Springs Air Force Base and interrogated.
That interrogation was about as intense as you can possibly get, right stopping short of shooting me in the head.
What were they saying to you?
Everything up to and including that, we can absolutely kill you right now and there'd be no one looking for you at all. And I mean, everything. They threatened my wife. They threatened to kill my wife. They said they'd stop at nothing. They said they thought they made that very clear. They couldn't believe that I had taken anyone out there to show them that, much less left with information like the flight test data, and wanted to know what else I had said, who else I had told specifically. They were crazy. They really were. They were completely out of control.
After this interrogation at Indian Springs Air Force Base, Bob says that he was put under constant surveillance by security personnel. His phones were tapped, his movements were monitored, and he often found his car followed by military helicopters. Worried about what might happen to him and angry about how he was being treated, he decided to hit back and approached a local TV station about an interview.
I thought if I did an interview in silhouette, it would be kind of pushing back a bit, or say, you guys stop, and not saying too much, but just saying enough just to let them know that I'm pushing back a bit and then lay off, or, it's going to get worse. It was really the only thing I could do.
Did you get any calls from the military or from former workers to say, what the hell are you doing?
Right after the interview aired, Dennis Mariani, who was my supervisor, called, and all he said was, do you have any idea what we're going to do to you now? And that was the end of the phone call. That was the last, well, really second to last communication I had with him, and you know, then I decided, well, you know, that's it, and really just said everything that I had seen and done, and just wanted to divorce the entire situation.
Even now, more than 20 years later, the jury is still out on Bob Lazar and his claims about his work out at Groom Lake. It's a fascinating story which he's stuck to for more than 2 decades. And although many dismiss it as pure fantasy, the fact is that some of his credentials did check out. In addition, his former employers and even the tax authorities were caught covering up and refusing to release information on him. Why would they do that unless there was something to hide? One thing is for certain, if he is telling the truth, then we're all in for some shocking revelations in the decades to come.
Is the government ever going to say, you know, we've been lying to you for 40 or 50 years? Not a chance. I believe they'd stage an event that is much more like what they do. They'll take a big cargo plane or C-130 or something, take one of the old discs that they've you know, analyzed time and time again and finished with, go up to a high altitude and push it out the back and then go fly away and say, oh look, the first disc has crashed, you know, here's a flying saucer. I mean, I can almost guarantee you that's the route they'd take.
There's nothing on their radars on the other...
Certainly there are a lot of questions about Bob's background that have not been satisfactorily answered. But there's too much that Bob knows, I think, that couldn't be explained any other way. He knows about the layout of the base. He knew about people who were involved in security checks. He knew when and where the test flights were going to take place because he took people out there 3 weeks in a row and they videotaped the tests. How did he know this stuff if he, in fact, did not have some kind of inside knowledge?
Do you think he'd make a good conduit of information? I mean, essentially a patsy.
Yes, I do. I think it's quite likely that Lazar was set up, perhaps to knowing that he would give out this information.
It's likely to be a very long time before we discover what is actually being done out at Groom Lake now. They seem to wait anything from 15 to 20 years or more after something has been retired before they acknowledge its existence.
This airplane was built, designed almost 40 years ago. 40 years before that, the hottest thing flying was a Seversky P-35. 40 years before that, it was a balloon. So the technology has not stood still. So there's a very good possibility that we are looking at man-made transportation for the 21st century.
It's been so hopelessly polluted that I'm not sure we will ever get to the bottom of this story, and that's sad. I suspect that whatever was out there, discs, alien or not, had now been moved to some other location, and we may never find them again.
There might have been reason 40 years ago to believe that people couldn't handle the idea of alien visitation. I don't think that's true anymore. I think we're far more sophisticated now.
Do you regret having screwed up at S4 and taking your friends there and blowing your security cover because you could still be working on UFOs today?
Yes and no. Yes, at times I'd like to be able to go back in time and played along with the game and not have done anything, and perhaps to this day still be working on them, because I did feel privileged and it was fascinating work once you can get around all the you know, oppressive military security. And you know, maybe we would have stumbled on something, and yeah, it would have been fascinating. I thought UFOs were pretty much a figment of someone's imagination. I didn't believe in them. I wasn't interested in them. Of course, I'm not even interested in them now. But I certainly do believe in them now.